Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to experience the spine-tingling reality of the paranormal world. It is a world where unidentified flying objects fly at top speeds across Canadian baseball games and Russia Today news sets. A world of unexplained omni sightings ranging from farmers to even presidents, ladies and gentlemen. A world where alien technology has been reverse engineered for human benefit. Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to enter the Bruce Montalvo zone. That's right. And ladies and gentlemen, my guest on today's program has had firsthand experience with UFO phenomenon. He is Major George A. Filer, a former U.S. Air Force navigator and intelligence officer with over 5,000 hours of flight experience, who briefed generals, politicians in his time regarding the threats and capabilities of our U.S. Air Force. Now, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Major George A. Filer to our broadcast. Hello, George. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, Bruce. I'm fine.
And, I tell you, I'm no psychic medium, but something told me that you'd be on my show sometime soon. But with all due seriousness, I understand that you gave a lecture at Contact in the Desert, the event. It was titled UFO Experiences Within the Air Force, correct? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, I was actually on Skype out at the Desert Show, but actually, once I got in the Air Force, I was flying tankers, and we were flying over England. And we had been told that we might be asked to chase some UFOs because the fighters have very short time aloft, and it's
right.
Make a lot story short. It's tough to find them and follow them unless you have a long capability to stay in the air. And we could fly some 16 hours. So obviously we had that capability, and we could fly almost as fast as a fighter. They used to refuel off us every day. Well, in any case, we just finished up refueling in the evening about 8 o'clock, and London Control called us, and we were off on circling the North Sea up by Sandringham. In any case, they called us to would we be willing to chase an unknown, unidentified craft? We said, sure, we'd be happy to. And it was over Stonehenge, which is about the center of England, and they gave us headings to Stonehenge, and as we've descended from altitude, they cleared the traffic away from us, which was a nice feeling. We had priority in our movement towards a UFO.
Right.
And we knew that it was about 30 miles directly ahead. We got our radar working and shining up on it, and we had this huge radar return. I don't know if anybody's seen the Firth of Forth Bridge in Scotland, but that was one of our standard navigation checkpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And it's roughly equivalent, to the San Francisco Bay Bridge. It's a big, huge bridge.
Right.
In any case, the radar return is very standard return that we could see, a long distance away. Matter of fact, you could take off and 200 miles away, you could pick up this radar return. Well, right in front of us is the Firth of Forth or San Francisco Bay Bridge radar return. And that's where the UFO was. So it was obviously a very large object in the sky. And we're looking, of course it's at night, we're looking straight ahead as we're descending. One interesting thing is we got descending so fast that we had to pull back on the power because we're going past our red line. And I often wonder if that's when you're in the chase, so to speak, you're
right.
Putting the power flat out, and not watching exactly what you're doing because you're chasing something. And we had to pull back in the power. And people probably know that we've lost many aircraft chasing UFOs. And I have a hunch that's one of the ways that it happens, that they're just trying to go too fast to catch up because they have tremendous speed. any case, we're diving on it, and we're getting out, 20 miles, 10 miles, and so on, and London Control is calling out, you're 10 miles ahead to the UFO, and we can see what looks like a ship at sea, like a cruise ship at sea with a whole bunch of lights. You couldn't actually see the outline of the craft, so to speak, but you saw multiple lights, almost like a city out there.
Right.
And when we got a couple of miles away from it, we're doing like over 400 miles an hour, and it just lit up and flew straight up into space. It's kind of like the shuttle that you see at night going up.
Right.
Reminded very much of that same scene. And London Control, well, we said, London, do you have a rocket launch or something? And they said, no, your unidentified has disappeared.
Wow.
You're allowed to go on with your mission. Well, we wrote it up in the navigator's log and stuff and turned it into the squadron. And frankly, it was almost like people didn't believe us, but nobody got too excited about it. I have heard that, other crews were told not to talk about it and everything. Well, that wasn't the case with us.
Right. You guys weren't debriefed after that? No?
Nobody debriefed us.
Wow. And your adrenaline, it must have been off the charts. Chasing a UFO at top speeds.
Yeah, we thought it was rather exciting. And
well, I could imagine.
The interesting part about it is a couple of weeks later, there was a dining in at the Officers Club at Sculthorpe, and the speaker was Prince Philip, the Queen's husband.
Right.
And he came on and gave his little talk, and he said he would like to speak with the air crew that chased the UFO, 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And interestingly enough, he knew all about our chase, and that we sat down with him and had dessert, so to speak, and smoked a cigar. He was, I don't normally smoke, but in any case.
And that's the perfect case, too, right?
But he was very familiar with what had happened. London Control apparently was briefing him, and he said that he liked to debrief the crews himself that had chased UFOs, or else one of his aides would go and visit the RAF pilot or whatever that happened to be chasing him, and he was quite convinced that they were real. They were flying in the English airspace, pretty much around the world. And I asked him why that, he had such interest. And he said he was raised by Earl Mountbatten, who had been a Navy admiral, one of the highest ranking officers in the military. As a matter of fact, he was the equivalent to MacArthur in the Pacific.
Wow.
And he said that and had like 1 million men under his control. And people don't remember, but he was also the last Viceroy of India when the British gave up the colony, so to speak, to India. But he said that his uncle was well aware of UFOs and had seen them up close, and that bluntly he believed his uncle who had raised him that the UFOs were real. And I have a hunch he knows a lot more than he was telling us, but he indicated there's no doubt in his mind that they exist. Absolutely. And I have found that if you can talk to 4-star admirals and generals and so on, most of them admit that they know about it. And they have a need to. You have a need to know in the military. 99.9% of the military people know nothing about it, unless they've seen it or chased them like we have. But 4-star generals and admirals who have area commands know about UFOs, and they appoint 3 or 4 people that will handle that for their command.
Absolutely. And that brings me to my next question. We talk about generals having prior knowledge. Now, the National Press Club held a meeting this year from April 29th to May 3rd regarding the existence of UFO phenomenon. And like you said, top military brass was in attendance. I believe there were 39 witnesses, and including you, with military personnel, coming forward regarding these encounters. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there was many. I was on the pilot council, so to speak, but there was 6 retired congressmen and senators, and they were very surprised, at the various testimony given, that they said that in Congress they had not received that kind of information and that it should be looked into.
Right.
As a matter of fact, they put together a paper that requested that the United Nations examine the whole field. It's interesting that China has asked for a study of UFOs, and that was vetoed by the United States for some reason.
Wow.
Of all the countries in the world, probably the United States is the one that doesn't want this information brought out.
Absolutely.
People don't realize that, our news media is pretty much controlled by 6 companies, and
that's right.
They provide the information that they feel will.
Right, these 3-letter news organizations run us all. Wow, amazing. Not me, that's for sure.
Well, I think, people like yourself and Jeff Rentz and so on are trying to get out what amounts to is the truth in
Absolutely.
the situation. At least you should listen to both sides and decide for yourself. And one of the things that I try to do is, since I was an intelligence officer and used to write weekly intelligence reports for the Air Force.
That's right.
And predicted the Tet Offensive in Vietnam and had some successes doing that. But I keep on writing this intelligence report. This time I'm writing it mostly about UFOs and ancient aliens and, what's going on in the Middle East and so on.
Right. Absolutely.
But, I'm happy to send it to anyone. We send it to thousands each week. And all they have to do is write major star, like a major star in the sky, at Verizon.net, and I'm happy to send it to them weekly.
That's right, and you're part of the National UFO Center as well. Now, Mr. Filer, moving on, what were some of the conversations that you can recall having with some generals and congressmen during your time as an intelligence officer for the Air Force, like you stated?
Well, most of the time, I wasn't in on any detailed information, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
But what we did get was the air crews regularly saw UFOs, and they would report them, and then I would, in turn, give that information to the generals in our morning briefings. That such and such air crew over Greece or wherever it happened to be had sighted a UFO and they had flown formation for 20 minutes or whatever. Or in some cases they even did rolls around the aircraft. Sometimes they show off,
Yeah.
Really. They seem to have a sense of humor almost.
That's right. And we have to go back to your encounter because, our listening audience, to me, it sounds like you encountered an alien mothership in 1962. The story that you were explaining to us earlier while you were flying over that United Kingdom airspace. But you also reported an extraterrestrial, an ET, being shot at Fort Dix. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, when I was 21st Air Force Intelligence, I would go to work, early in the morning to prepare my briefing for the generals at 8 o'clock.
Right.
And this one morning, September 27th, 1978, I went into work. And it was a little unusual. They stopped us at the gate and made us show our ID cards and all this kind of thing. And as I drove on, I could see a bunch of red lights out on the runway, so I assumed that maybe there'd been a aircraft crash or something.
Right.
In any case, when I got into the command post, I was briefed that there had been UFOs in the pattern all night, and that one apparently crashed, or at least was damaged or something and landed at Fort Dix. Now, Fort Dix and McGuire are right together. There's just a fence between the two. And that apparently a security policeman had seen an alien, what you describe roughly as, 4 foot tall, probably a gray,
Right.
and inched amongst a lot of military equipment and told him to stop. And the alien did. In any case, the story is that he was shot the alien and put a couple bullets into the UFO that was hovering above them.
Wow.
And the UFO flew away, and the alien started running towards McGuire Air Force Base. And they said that what they were telling me is that they had found the alien out on the end of the runway at McGuire, that apparently he had gone through the fence or over it and had died.
Wow.
On the runway, and that a C-141 was coming in from Wright-Patterson to pick him up. And I was kind of surprised because I didn't know there was one C-141s at Wright-Patterson. Apparently there was two for these special kind of missions. And
they came and they swooped them right up.
They came in and actually picked up the alien who had passed away. Now, I didn't see the alien, but I was told that I should brief what I just told you to the general that morning.
Wow.
And then later on, just before I went on, I said I had tried to call around, to whether we had a wing command post below us to check the story out with them, and I also called the security police and checked the story out with them, and they all claimed that it was real, that there was some kind of a body picked up at the end of the runway. However, I did not see it. I was told that it looked something like a gray, that it did not look human. Let's put it that way.
Right, the big black eyes and the oversized head, correct?
Well, apparently that's what they saw. I didn't see it, and I wasn't given information about that. One interesting thing is that our wing commander was shortly transferred after that. The security police who were out guarding the body were transferred almost immediately. I was retired, and anybody who knew anything about it was separated in one way or the other.
I could imagine so. Now, George, the UK, the United Kingdom, I mean, really, it's been a hotbed for alien activity. I know you're probably familiar with the Rendlesham Forest incident, right, where the U.S. Air Force, most of their personnel were eyewitnesses to UFO phenomenon for over 3 days, this being in Suffolk, England, around December of 1980. But what are some of the most active areas for UFO sightings, in your opinion, besides England, George?
Well, there's plenty in the United States.
Right.
We're getting up between MUFON. I'm the Eastern Regional Director of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network.
That's right.
We're getting around numbers 1,000 reports a month. And then there's Peter Davenport at the National UFO Reporting Center, and he's getting about 1,000 reports a month. So we're talking in round numbers, a couple thousand reports per month. And when I say reports, generally speaking, you have to go on your computer and fill out, a lot of information and describe it and so on. So it takes the average person like a half hour to fill it out online. So we figure we're only getting, we'll say 20% of the reports or whatever.
Right.
And we're starting to get a lot of good video and pictures that I try to carry some of them in my weekly files called Filer's Files.
That's right.
This week, for example, I'm writing about the Giza power plant. I don't know if people have been to Egypt and seeing the huge pyramid there.
Right.
But there's indications that these ancient pyramids, and there's people who feel that, well, the Egyptians claim they're about 4,000 years old, and other people are claiming they're 10 to 15,000 years old, and they're just found 5 in Bosnia and over 100 in China, and they all seem to be what amounts to is power plants. They generate power within themselves and still generate power today, even though they're thousands of years old.
That's right.
So the question is, well, what's the power for? Well, I think that it was used for what we refer to as UFOs. That most of them have flat tops, or you can just hover above them, and there's power that's generated from within the pyramid and the surrounding area. Electrical energy and other types of energy,
Right.
hydrogen and oxygen and electrical energy and gravitational energy is absorbed by the UFO and takes off. Now, people don't realize that even today, one of the common sightings of UFOs is hanging over power plants or, these huge power lines that come through. And
Right.
we get reports on a regular basis of the craft sitting over those power lines and what looks like they're taking the power. So I live in New Jersey and not far from the Salem nuclear power plant. And when we see a UFO over the power lines, called the power plant and said, have you lost power? And they admit to losing a great deal of power. Now, they
Wow.
don't think it's necessarily from the UFO, but they do know that they are losing power. And I, informed them that UFOs might be taking this information. We found that a Pennsylvania company that produces power was warning their employees to that effect. So there's something going on there. Then we've also seen the UFOs taken from the space shuttle, the space shuttle flying
Right.
300 miles out or so, looking down on the Earth, and the UFO will be flying along at thousands of miles an hour and comes to huge storms, with electrical lightning and so on going on.
That's right.
And they'll stop right over the top of these storms and appear to take on, the lightning into the craft in some way.
Wow.
Probably building up their battery, so to speak.
Right. And what I think is funny is when most of these sightings occur, I mean, they sometimes happen on popular roads, like popular highways. It's like almost as if the extraterrestrials are tourists when they come to the Earth, and they want to know how to get to point A to point B, so they follow the highways. Have you heard a lot about that? Sightings throughout popular highways and whatnot.
Yes, we get a lot of trucker reports, particularly. They're out on the
Right.
road. A lot of them have computers, that kind of thing, and they'll be. We get a lot through Pennsylvania, also state of Washington and Oregon, and quite a bit in California. In the mountains.
How about Texas?
Texas is one of the areas that has the largest number of UFO sightings.
Thought so. Right.
It's pretty well spread all over the country, more so than people realize. That, but
Right.
But a lot of it is, on the weather and how much you can see and this kind of thing. And I talk to people that work at the Philadelphia airport, and they say almost daily they have UFOs going over at very high altitude.
Right.
UFOs meaning they don't know exactly who and what they are. They're not reporting or anything, but they're moving at speeds that we're not aware that we have craft that move at 10,000 miles an hour or 100,000 miles an hour.
Absolutely. But, Mr. Filer, sir, do you think that some of these eyewitness reports could also be maybe military, aircraft that we've reverse engineered? I mean, because the government is at least, I want to say, 50 years ahead of the population in technology. I mean, could these very well be military aircraft? I mean, most of what we would call UFO encounters?
Well, Jan Harrison, who lives in the Los Angeles area, by the way, is the new MUFON international director.
Right.
And I think it was UCLA that he was graduated as a nuclear engineer. And Ben Rich, who was the head of the Skunk Works and probably the greatest engineer in history of this country, at least since Tesla and so on.
Absolutely.
Gave a talk to all the engineers, and I think this was in 1998. And he told them at that time, the United States and Lockheed essentially had the capability of taking ET home, which would indicate that we have what amounts to as UFOs. And as a matter of fact, he showed a UFO, a disc-type craft in his talk. And he was, they helped build the SR-71 and so on. Has some of the best, some of the best aircraft we've ever built in this country. So it's quite likely that we do have some, what we would call UFOs, unidentified flying aircraft that are not our own, that some are our own that we've back engineered.
Right. I mean, like the Russians, for instance, their military base, Kapustin Yar, they would actually have their military base from an aerial view resemble some type of crop circle or something to lure unidentified flying object to fly in their airspace, because they had directives to shoot all unidentified flying object down in hopes to reverse engineer this technology. So the Russians have been doing this, I want to say, almost more or around the same time as us.
Yeah, I don't encourage shooting them down, but a lot of nations apparently have tried to. I know I'd heard similar situations in Cuba and so on, where different countries had attempted to shoot them down. And, as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that we have too. And usually, the aircraft that do that don't come back. They seem not to. They seem to be neutral, but if you attempt to shoot them, they will return the fire, so to speak.
Wow, I could only imagine what type of firepower they're packing, too. Wow.
When I was briefing the generals, I remember in 1976, the Tehran, Iran sighting came in. It was confidential, but it was from our, I guess it was the Iranian Air Force on the information, but in any case, they had seen a UFO just north of Tehran and sent up 2 F-4s to intercept it.
Wow.
And it looked like the UFO was sending, we'll say, like a missile at them. So they turned on their weapon systems and attempted to fire at the UFO, and the weapon systems would not work. As a matter of fact, the radar and everything shut down.
Wow.
Only allowing them to keep airborne, so to speak, indicating vast technological capability far above anything that we had. And
absolutely unbelievable. Wow. Now, most people, tell us about the ridicule factor. I mean, how governments of the world try to silence their detractors people who know, such as yourself, people who know that we're not alone. How effective has this ridicule factor been in the past?
Well, even people like Edgar Mitchell, who's the sixth man who walked on the moon, he's
Right.
claimed that UFOs are real and so on, and NASA, so many words, denies that he knows what he's talking about. And pretty much anyone in the military. What's interesting is that you talk to some of these people in NASA and the military and stuff that know about this privately, will say, you're right.
Exactly.
They do exist. They are here, but we're not allowed to reveal that information, to the public. But and if you talk too much about UFOs and so on, you probably won't be promoted. There's a lot of that kind of thing going on. And
Right.
each president has pretty much made the decision to not to reveal the information to the public. And although President Reagan and President Truman both talked about it fairly often.
That's right. Now, speaking of them, George, I find it amazing that extraterrestrials make themselves known to our leadership here on Earth. I mean, from everyone, from George Washington to, like you said, Ronald Reagan, Nixon, even Carter. Let's talk about some of those presidential UFO stories. Can you tell us a few?
Well, President Reagan was probably the one who talked about it the most, that he had actually seen them when he was governor. Actually,
right.
Truman also saw them when they were governor.
He was chasing one down, just like you were, right? I mean, he ordered the pilot, hey, follow that UFO now.
Yeah, that he felt it was, something that should be followed and chased. But he and his wife saw it, and apparently told a lot of, the important people in Hollywood, that kind of thing, that UFOs were real, and they had seen one and chased it, and so on. And then when he was in office, he made several speeches indicating that, UFOs existed, and that several comments to the effect that, if there was a force, from outer space, that all the nations of the world would unite and fight them together. Interestingly, it wasn't too long before the Soviet Union ceased to exist and Russia existed, and that now our astronauts are aboard the ISS, International Space Station, which is really run by by Russia now.
Incredible.
There's a lot of interesting situations that the Soviet Union stopped existing. I've talked to colonels in the Soviet Army, said that there was no real problems that they could see, that all of a sudden the Soviet Union seemed to stop existing. That may have had something to do with the president, Khrushchev, getting together and deciding that we were going to fight certain aliens.
Right. He stated that, is there not already an alien force among us?
Right.
But
the news media didn't care much of that, but it is available, that you can see it online and so on.
Right. Even Nixon. I mean, Nixon was good friends with, the guy who popularized "pow" right in the kisser. I mean, Jackie Gleason.
Right.
Isn't there a story about Jackie Gleason asking Reagan for permission to see the bodies of UFO? Did that really happen, or is that a rumor?
Well, I was told it really happened.
Right.
It happened that the company that I worked for after I retired from the Air Force owned some like a apartment building. And my wife went down there with the owner of the company. The ladies would go down and spend a week or so in Florida, but it was right next to Jackie Gleason's area that he owned. And
Right.
Jackie Gleason's wife and their friends who were kind of like movie stars. I can't think of the title of his name, but there was that trucker series that was at the pool
Right.
with her, and they, in any case, they were discussing the fact that Jackie Gleason had a home in the shape of a UFO, and that he, in fact, had been taken by President Nixon to Homestead Air Force Base and shown alien bodies and alien craft.
Wow.
And that he was, quite excited about it, and had told, you might say, this small group of people that he had seen that. Well, this small group of people was also at the pool with my wife, and not to brag, but I have a very beautiful blonde wife.
Absolutely. Hey, congratulations. I'm looking for one too.
In any case, well, she was a model and all that kind of thing. And
very nice.
And in any case, people kind of warmed up to her, and talked to her and that kind of thing. Well, in any case, they told her that Jackie Gleason had seen the aliens, etc. Now, how it's a story. Jackie Gleason did not tell her personally. It was the wife and this other good friend of his.
It was word around the campfire, right?
Right.
Well, I've also heard. I mean, so many rumors out there. I mean, I've been watching this wonderful new show that's narrated by John B. Wells of Coast to Coast, Unseen Alien Files. He said that, well, he narrated that actually Nixon showed up at Gleason's door and took him to go see this restricted area, these aliens that were deceased.
Well, when Gleason came, or Gleason was frequently down in southern Florida, and when he would come down, he'd like to, meet with Gleason, and they would go golfing together, that kind of thing.
Right.
And usually there was some, TV stars or that apparently Nixon enjoyed being with these, prominent people.
Right.
And got along with them, that kind of thing. And
I don't know how anybody could get along with Nixon.
Apparently he did them favors.
I bet. Well, George, moving on, let's talk about some of your Filer's Files. Now, the comet Ison. I mean, people have been talking about they recently witnessed two suns in our orbit. I mean, we're not too sure about that, but the comet Ison's existence, we're sure about that. What's the latest surrounding the comet, George?
Well, as I understand, it's going to be going past Mars at the end of this month. And, it exists out in space, but it looks a little bit different than most comets. And so we have a dozen satellites going around Mars now, and they're apparently, at least some of them, are going to try to get a better look at it up close. Its path is to go, past Mars and eventually past the sun and come around the sun and come back towards us. And it'll come comparatively close to us in the spring, I believe. But some people are claiming it's Nibiru. It's
that's right.
Not really a comet, that it's a planet, and it does look a little strange, and there is questions about it. It's probably just a regular comet, but it's one of those things that's a good idea to watch. And the government's kind of doing a lot of strange things. It's almost like they're getting ready for some kind of a
That's
major
right.
problem in the future. Storing up food and water and ammunition and that kind of thing that seems more unusual than normal. So I suggest in my files for people that if they got an extra few dollars, buy some water and
Absolutely.
some food. It never can hurt in time of bad situation.
Go buy some canned corn and some Spam, because it's got its own lid, its own can opener.
Never know when there's going to be earthquakes and tsunamis and volcanoes and pretty much the same kind of things. But our Earth is going through an area where there's more comets and asteroids and that kind of thing than a normal. And remember last year one flew over Russia and exploded and so on. And
that's
we
right.
don't always see these as they come in because they're dark objects in the dark sky, and one can sneak through without seeing it, or they may even know it's coming and feel there's not much they can do about it. Will it hit the ocean or will it hit
a major city? I mean,
yeah, you never know.
Incredible. Yeah. And there's some people out there that say the chances of that happening are fairly slim. But like you just stated, last year in Russia, I mean, there's an example right there. It could definitely happen.
Well, it's happened in the past through thousands of years. It's obviously not every day. But on the other hand, they say that we get hit by tiny asteroids thousands of times a day. So there's and we're passing through a stream of debris that could be dangerous. So I suggest to people just play it a little bit safe. That their electricity might go out for a week or something, and then you can't buy anything at the stores, and you've got enough to get you by. That never hurts. Just with the fires and stuff.
Absolutely.
It never pays to be a little bit ready. And then you got Fukushima and the leaking radiation, all that.
Oh man. Exactly. I mean, we're killing this world. I mean, this world is not going to be inhabitable if we keep. I mean, some parts already aren't. I mean, we keep going the way we're going. We're living, George, as if we have another planet to go to. And actually, that's funny. I mean, what can you tell us about the Mars One project? I mean, are they purposely trashing the Earth to just colonize Mars and get out of here?
I don't think they're. I think there's a good chance that we will attempt to go to Mars, not too distant future if we're not already there. And we're certainly there in numbers of satellites, photographing everything. And there's a lot of places on Mars, which I try to bring up each week, that there's places that look like ancient ruins.
That's right.
That society, if it exists on Mars, has probably gone underground. But still on Mars, for example, this week it shows what it looks like an arch. There's plenty of pyramid-like structures, or plenty of, city-like structures. There's even UFOs in our in our photos.
That's right.
And, recently, the Russians set off a satellite to go to Mars, and it basically crashed. So It was interesting that they said it was the United States that knocked down their Martian satellite. They blame us for a lot of things, but I thought it was rather unusual that they should go that far.
They're like the Pittsburgh Steelers of football playing against the Raiders, saying, "Hey, they're fouling us. They're fouling."
Well, sometimes there's truth behind some of these things.
That's right.
So in other words, even though it's not mentioned in our news media, it's one of those things you should be aware of, and then start weighing the evidence.
Wow. You're absolutely right. Now, Mr. Filer, we are unfortunately coming to an end. Tell our listening audience where they can find more of you, and I mean where they could even put down that they saw a UFO, make a report. I mean, they can do that at your website, correct?
Yes, the National UFO Center, or at MUFON headquarters.com. Any case, it's important to report these things that you see, or you can just send me an email at majorstar@verizon.net, and I'm happy to send you my intelligence files each week called Filer's Files. They're free, and people say there's a lot of good information in them. And one of the things that we've found is that if you're interested in UFOs, many of your friends think it's all a bunch of nonsense. Well, you just take my files and say, here, this is what an Air Force major thinks.